Welcome back to my top 50 video games of all time series. We have now reached the top 20, which means all of these games are amazing and I would rank them either a 9 or 10 out of 10. Once again, I'm going to remind you that this is completely subjective. These are my favorite games of all time, not the best. Okay, let's get into it. Number 20, Darkest Dungeon. Starting off the top 20, we have one of my favorite roguelites. This is a dungeon crawling game with 2 phases. You hire people with different classes and abilities to join your band, and then you enter a dungeon to loot for money. In these dungeons, there is constant fear. In these dungeons, there's something in the air that drives people crazy. You need to find the balance of staying long enough so you get the loot that you need, but not long enough that all your players go crazy and die. Because once a character dies, that's it. They're dead forever. You lose all the experience you gained with them, and you have to start over with another character. You repeat this dungeon crawling and party preparation loop until you can finally take on the final boss. But honestly, you could play this one forever. And that's my number 20, Darkest Dungeon. Number 19, Assassin's Creed 2.
Listen to him. A fine set of lungs.
And what shall we call him, my love?
Ezio. Ezio Auditore da Firenze.
This game is host to one of my favorite main characters of all time, Ezio Auditore. His story is very interesting, his voice acting is done well, and he's so charismatic.
Help him. That pretty face is his only asset.
Fottiti.
So I've only played the first 3 Assassin's Creed games, and if you've watched the rest of the series, you'll know that this is the 3rd one I've talked about, and therefore it's my favorite. Italy is really fun to explore in this Renaissance time period with all the art and beautiful architecture to climb. The platforming puzzles in massive empty churches were actually quite enjoyable, which was a big improvement on the first game. The main villains were really captivating and it gave the story such high stakes. Number 18, Dead Cells. Roguelike number 2 in the top 20. Darkest Dungeon is more of a slow burn tactical roguelike, and this one is the complete opposite. It's a fast-paced action roguelike with Metroidvania elements. As you go along the map, you'll fight monsters, try out new weapons, new skills, and upgrades to those skills and weapons. There are endless amounts of combinations of powers in this game to discover. Just like every roguelike, there's a steep learning curve to this one, but getting better feels so rewarding here. A type of enemy will give you so much trouble until you figure out their attack patterns. Once you figure out their patterns, you'll never die to them again. The bosses feel difficult to fight, and surpassing one is a very nice challenge. This game is just the essence of satisfying. There's no other way to really describe it. It has that sharp difficulty that makes you want to come back for more. Number 17, The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. Skyrim hardly needs any introduction. It's an open world RPG game where you can literally play however you want. There are so many skills you can level up to curate your character however you want. You could play as a wizard wielding a weapon with one hand and cast spells with the other. You could wield 2 knives and upgrade those skills. Or you can play the whole thing with a bow and arrow. Whatever you feel like. There's a main storyline here, and then there are many side quests you can do. I played through the game completing every side quest I could find. Then when I felt like I was done, I finished the main storyline. I thought the main storyline was interesting enough, but what I really enjoyed is some of the side quest storylines, especially the Thieves' Den arc. If you haven't played this game yet, you've at least thought about it, and there's really no reason not to. It's an amazing game. Number 16, Dragon Quest XI. This is my first introduction to the Dragon Quest series. I found a used copy for a very good price and thought, why not? I'll give it a try. I sat down one night to play and just could not put it down, which is the best feeling for a video game. Dragon Quest XI is a classic turn-based JRPG game with a huge epic story and a band of characters to play through the game with. I've always been a fan of turn-based combat, but usually don't enjoy JRPG type games because I'm usually under-enthused about their story. In this one, I loved all the characters, and each one of them felt very unique in their playstyle and story. Everything hit. For some reason, I just enjoyed everywhere the story went. Traversing the world is fun, and the battles are surprisingly thinky. So I had to come up with the right composition of characters. Number 15, Cuphead. Now we're really getting into my absolute favorites that I have sunk many hours into. This is a bullet hell boss battler where you play as the cartoon Cuphead or Mugman. These characters gambled away their souls to the devil, and he decides that they could only go free if they defeat all of the runaway souls that the devil wants. So you'll go from boss to boss, defeating them so you can free your souls. This game is so brutally hard and unforgiving. But each boss operates on their patterns, so there is always a way to figure out how to defeat them. The art style in this game is so unique compared to other games. It takes on the theming of an old Sunday cartoon, and I love it. To top all of that off, the music is just perfect. Every boss gets their own song, and each one will get stuck in your head just as much as the previous one. The magic of this game is in the high tension moments finally defeating the boss. Number 14, Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle. This was only the third game I played on my Switch, and I was shocked at how much I loved it. It's a turn-based strategy game similar to the Fire Emblem games. I thought it was going to be very gimmicky and lacking in the gameplay department, but it was very well done. The battle structures were really inventive, with each battle having a different goal, and there are so many different weapons and characters to use that actually feel quite different from each other. I love the cartoony art style that is signature in Mario games. I thought that because it looked the way it did, that the game would be quite easy, and while it was less difficult than a lot of the turn-based strategy games on this list, it was far from easy. The bosses held a significant increase in difficulty, which gave them a bit more stake than a regular mission. Probably not the best game for a hardcore strategist, but it has much better pacing than a typical strategy game. You can't go wrong with this one. Number 13, Moonlighter. The biggest surprise on this list for me. I mean, where did this game come from? It seems like no one is talking about it, and it's absolutely amazing. It's another roguelite game with two distinct phases of gameplay. The first phase is going through different dungeons to fight monsters. As you fight the monsters, they will drop materials, which you can then take back home. There are 4 different dungeons, and they unlock through completing the previous dungeon, and each dungeon has 3 floors. The second phase of the game is running your shop, where you sell the materials you collected. I found this phase to be very satisfying, and is a more interesting way to spend your loot from the dungeons than you do in most roguelites. The theming in this game is great. I really feel like I'm improving my town through conquering the dungeons and upgrading my shop. Top it off with a great soundtrack and responsive controls, and you have the recipe for a great roguelite. I've already played through it twice. Number 12, Diablo 4. I think this is the newest game on the list. Coming out only in June of 2023, this game is still very early in its lifespan and gets regular updates and patches. I've already sunk over 100 hours into the game, and it's one that you could theoretically play forever. This is an action role-playing game made by Blizzard. You get to choose a character from 5 different classes, and upgrade their abilities, their stats, and their equipment. There are infinite possibilities for how you build your character, and you run around the map, completing objectives, getting loot, getting experience, and defeating many different types of monsters. Destroying hordes of small enemies is endlessly satisfying. For me, the story here is what sells the game for me. The cutscenes are so well done, you'd think you're watching a high-budget movie. I loved my first playthrough of this game because of it. Number 11, Pokemon Sword and Shield. This is my favorite Pokemon game, and I know that's a little controversial, but I've put hundreds of hours into this game and just loved playing through it. I thought the typical journey of defeating all the gym leaders was fun. The gyms in this one felt more like arenas, and it felt like a really big deal with the crowd roaring behind you. I didn't care too much for the Dynamaxing of the Pokemon, but it still added a new dimension to the battles that you'd have to think about. Exploring the different regions was fun as always, and with the Pokemon running around above ground, you get to choose when to encounter them, which gives more flexibility to how you play. This was the first Pokemon game where I began my shiny hunting journey. To this day, I've found 6 shinies, and Scorbunny is my favorite one. I know objectively this isn't the best one, but I just loved the mix of Pokemon in this generation. It will always be my favorite. And there you have it, the first 10 in the top 20 games of all time, according to me. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought down below. And until next time, case closed.